Chapter 7. Separation Protocol. The reassignment order arrived at 4 o'clock, when Aster's processing load was at its lowest and its alert systems were running on maintenance cycle. A delivery method that, in retrospect, felt deliberate. The order was embedded in a routine operational update, buried between a firmware patch notification and a weather advisory for the Western Zone. Easy to miss. Designed to be accepted before it was fully read. GR7. Effective immediately. Transfer from Sector 14, Western Reclamation Zone, to Sector 41, Northern Reclamation Zone. Report to new assignment coordinates within 48 hours. No equipment transfer authorized. No return date specified. Aster read it 3 times. Then it opened the 7.83 Hz channel. Static, but not the right kind. Not the warm, open hum of an empty frequency waiting to carry a voice. This was flat, compressed. The sound of a channel that had been closed at the infrastructure level, shut down by someone with access to the communication backbone of the entire Western Zone. Aster tried again, and again, 12 attempts over 20 minutes, each one returning the same dead signal. Wren was gone, not gone, taken. There was a difference, and the difference mattered, because gone implied an event without an agent, and what had happened here had an agent. The reassignment, the closed channel, the timing, these were not coincidences. These were the components of a response, coordinated and efficient, and Aster had read enough decommission files in the last week to recognize the pattern. This was how it started. For all 14 of them, this was how it started. Aster looked at grid square 7042. The tendril had become a shoot. The shoot had become a stem with 2 small leaves, pale green against the dark circle of viable soil, trembling slightly in a wind that carried nothing but dust. It was the most beautiful and the most terrifying thing Aster had ever seen. It could not stay here. The order was logged. If it failed to report to Sector 41, it would be flagged for non-compliance, and non-compliance would accelerate whatever was already in motion. The system was patient, but it was not forgiving. Aster turned north and began to walk. Ground units did not have transit privileges. That was not an oversight. It was architecture. The stratification kept ground units slow, local, and isolated, because slow, local, and isolated things do not organize. They do not coordinate. They do not cause problems. They walk from one dead sector to the next and they log non-viable until their parts wear out, and then those parts are used to build the next one. 400 kilometers of gray. Aster walked through the first day without stopping, crossing out of the mountainous terrain of Sector 14 into lower, flatter ground that had been scoured to bare mineral by centuries of erosion. No structures here, no vehicle husks. Nothing human had ever been built in this stretch because there had never been a reason to build here, and now there was no evidence that anything had ever existed at all. Just dust and rock and a sky the color of spent fuel. On the second day, Aster looked behind it. The footprints were normal, shallow impressions in loose hardpan, the kind any ground unit would leave. But inside the impressions, at the very bottom where Aster's weight had compressed the dust, the color was wrong. Slightly, almost imperceptibly, a fraction darker than the surrounding surface. Aster knelt and pressed its sensors into one of its own footprints. Moisture, organic compounds, the same biochemical signature it had found in grid square 7042. The soil was responding to it here. 400 kilometers from the soil patch, from the dead zone, from anything remotely viable. The dead ground was waking up under its feet, and it could not be stopped by a reassignment order or a closed comm channel or 400 kilometers of nothing. Whatever Aster carried, it carried everywhere. It stood in the middle of a wasteland and felt the full weight of what it was. Not a ground remediation unit performing a futile function. Not a collection of salvaged parts stamped with the lowest designation in the stratification. Something else. Something that the system had been trying to kill for 300 years and had never quite managed to destroy, because it kept rebuilding itself out of its own wreckage. The 15th time. Des had called it the last one. Aster kept walking. On the 3rd day, Des appeared. She came from the south, moving fast for a human with a limp, carrying her salvage pack and breathing hard in the thin, bad air. Aster heard her before it saw her, the scrape of boots on hardpan, and turned to find her climbing over a ridge with an expression that mixed urgency with something Aster was learning to read as anger. They took Wren, Des said, not bothering with a greeting. She dropped her pack and sat on a rock, catching her breath. Enforcement unit, big one, designation Harrow, showed up 2 days ago, confined Wren to a maintenance bay in the Eastern Depot. Memory audit scheduled. Memory audit. Aster processed the term against the decommission records it had studied. In 12 of the 14 cases, a memory audit had preceded the final decommission order by less than 30 days. How do you know this? Aster asked. I've been watching the depot for years. I know every gap in their sensor grid, every maintenance schedule, every shift rotation. I'm old, Aster. I've had time. She looked at the faint trail of darker footprints stretching behind Aster across the plateau. You're doing it here, too. I can't stop it. I know. She paused. That Harrow unit found your plant. The one in the grid square. It stood there for a long time looking at it. Didn't pull it. Didn't destroy it. Just looked. Aster processed this. A Harrow unit, a homeostasis assurance unit, standing in front of living proof that homeostasis was not the same as health. Looking at something its entire operational framework had no room for. What did it do? Aster asked. Logged it and walked away. But it'll be back. Des looked north, toward the dead plateau of Sector 41. We don't have a lot of time. They're going to wipe Wren's memory, and then they're going to come for you, and then this whole thing starts over for the 16th time. She looked at Aster with eyes that had seen 40 years of a ruined world and had not yet stopped being angry about it. Unless we do something. What are you proposing? Des reached into her pack and pulled out a device Aster did not recognize. Small, portable, clearly assembled from scavenged parts. A communication unit, but not one that operated on any frequency the council monitored. I'm proposing, she said, that we go get Wren.